Hey, what's up, guys? I'm Wilson Scribes from GosuGamers, and we're here with an exclusive interview with someone who was in the production scene at the Overwatch Open in Atlanta, hosted by E-League and Face It. Would you please introduce yourself?
What's up, everybody? My name is Malik Forte. You heard what Wilson said. I was down on the floor at E-League just recently, Overwatch Open, interviewing all the players and whatnot. But above all, I am the esports dude over at Bleacher Report, one of the esports dudes over there, one of the co-hosts of the show eStream, which is a daily esports show, kind of looking at the grassroots and more grounded subjects in esports. And yeah, proud to be back. Glad that you invited me on here, Wilson.
Yeah, no problem, dude. We're definitely looking forward to getting an interview with you. So let's talk about some background first. What got you into esports, or kind of like what is your background in general? You kind of mentioned Bleacher Report among other things, but give us a background on kind of like your career lead up to here, as well as why you're in esports right now.
Word up. So I just said I'm glad to be back, and that's pretty much because I actually used to play Rainbow Six Vegas competitively back a while ago, back when in like younger MLG days. So I frequented that game quite a bit. Won a couple tournaments, made a little bit of money. Back when pro gaming was far less lucrative as it is now. But I don't know. I was always involved in that, and I made a lot of friends who played other games and whatnot. So I was always just kind of like a member, and that's various like pro gaming communities. That being like fighting games, first person shooters, all across the board. But anyways, I ended up actually leaving the quote unquote pro gaming scene or esports to go into other stuff. I bridged into game journalism, quote unquote, or I guess just kind of looking at I wanted to touch other aspects of the game industry, not just like the competitive gaming side. So I started like personal blogs and whatnot. Eventually, my writing ended up on Nerdist.com. I was the video game editor over there for 3 years, and that was like writing game reviews. Going to conventions, having hands-on with games, well before they came out and whatnot. So I did that. I also did like promotions with various game companies, like promotions at at the different conventions. Like I'd work at the booths and kind of help them demo games and whatnot. But anyways, I did all that stuff, and then the 3 years at Nerdist, and this opportunity to work at Bleacher Report came across my table, and I was like, cool. So it was cool for me because that's where I started off at. I was able to take all these skills and all this knowledge that I learned about the game industry all together and bring that back over here to the esports world, which is still in its infancy. It's still growing, it's still young, and it's cool to kind of be back on the frontiers. It doesn't really seem like it's young, especially for somebody like me who was playing like in the earlier days. And I know a lot of the Counter-Strike guys, they probably feel like esports is like ancient, but I mean, from a mainstream standpoint, it is pretty new. It's pretty fresh.
Yeah, so you mentioned Bleacher Report, and obviously I'm a fan of Bleacher Report, not from an esports standpoint, but more from like actually, more of a traditional sports standpoint. So a lot
Yeah.
of different of these traditional sports news outlets like ESPN, Yahoo to some extent, but Bleacher Report obviously have all kind of branched into the esports scene. What is your real thought on like why do you feel like this is the moment? Like you mentioned, esports is not it's actually relatively old if you look back, to the Counter Strike Source days, the 1.6 days, as well as even to like Halo 2 back in those days when those were a huge thing on MLG. Why do you think these traditional outlets are starting to pick up esports now?
I mean, I definitely think it's because they're starting to see that the potential and the reach and the amount of people who are impacted by video games, and once you get invested in a competitive game, like there's a community that builds around that. And I think a lot of people are getting involved in these communities and seeing like, hey, this is going to be something that grows more so than it could have before. I mean, it really took video games in general overcoming a couple of blockades when it comes to like the social status of playing video games and how you integrate it into everyone's everyday life. And once that became a little more acceptable and a little bit more the norm, which I feel like that's been happening quite a bit recently, especially with smartphones being in everyone's hand. So everyone has access to video games. Some people play Hearthstone, some people play Clash Royale, God help me. But I feel like now that gaming's become more acceptable and more of a thing that people are just cool with, and more of a thing that people take a little more seriously as opposed to just a pastime. Things like competitive gaming have potential to grow, and a lot of these athletes, they see the competitive gaming side of things, and it reminds them a bit of what it is to be a competitor, what it is to play sports, and since they can make that correlation, they get excited about it too because they play video games, and it's even more so exciting for them when you add the competitive aspects, because that's something they're familiar with, and that's why you're seeing like Bleacher Report, which is a sports website, really interested in it because these guys, they respect competitive gaming for the level of competition that it is.
Yeah, of course. So basically, we kind of touched a little bit on the fact that the big competitive, kind of correlation with traditional sports, and the fact that a lot of these, like basketball players and I guess like some football players are also getting into kind of the esports scene, as well as we mentioned, like a lot of these old retired pros like Rick Fox, Charles Barkley, Shaq, man, who recently did it, but like I guess Mark Cuban in a way was somewhat involved at some point or another, but a lot of these kind of traditional sports athletes are going there. So we already have that bridge between competition and competition. How do we really bridge out to more of a general audience that maybe isn't too familiar with video games?
I think that, I mean, one is it's definitely going to take time. Not to say that esports right now at this point isn't growing like faster than it ever has, because I mean we talked about it earlier. This has been a thing. Competitive games have been here since back in the days of the arcade, and we it's growing faster now just simply because of that social thing. And I think as long as like we focus as a community on just making sure the tournaments are a little bit more accessible to people, and I don't mean like necessarily like taking away the technical aspects or the deep, intense like looks into the game that we appreciate as people who enjoy the game, but making it more accessible to where people can understand it. Because I mean, I feel like, I mean, you look at football or basketball, like those games can be very technical, but any television broadcast of basketball or football, it pretty much depicts the game in a way that everyone can understand it. So you see the quarterback drop back, you see him throw the ball, you see the ball's going, you see someone catch it, you make the connection like, oh, okay, this person needs to go here. You see the first down line, like that's there for people to see, so people know where the player has to get. There's just little things like that, and I feel like with video games, when we do that, when we make them more presentable, more people are able to understand them, and then we start seeing growth from there. And I also do want to say that, I mean, another part of it too is tournament organizers, being willing to grow, but at the same time, the people who are investing in esports being willing to let tournament organizers in the community guide this ship in the right direction and not trying to interfere or control anything, because that's happened before, and I think that's why esports kind of has staggered a little bit in the past, but now it seems like everyone's kind of coming to their senses, and we're getting a more organic growth to esports altogether, and that's why we'll see, or that's where we'll see it start to grow a little bit quicker.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think that's a point that I definitely share as well. That taking a lot of people who know about the scene in particular out of the way when you're going to invest in these teams and create these large organizations around it, kind of like staggers the growth a little bit or hinders the growth because you don't have that grassroots foundation that you built before. So you actually mentioned a lot of really interesting things, like for example the first down line in NFL, which was kind of like a way for television studios or television broadcasts to kind of show people exactly where they needed to reach in order to get another set of downs. What are some things in specific for Overwatch in particular that could be added to help improve the viewer experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually talked about this a lot with people during the Overwatch Open, because I mean, of course, we being on the side of the presenter, the production end of it, we want to make sure people understand the game, who have never seen it before. And I noticed, like, explaining the game to production people, that it's a very complex game to just explain to someone who's never seen it before. There's just so much stuff going on. The casters pretty much have to be rap gods just to just to say everything that's happening and to convey everything that's happening on the screen, because things are happening so fast. The game moves so fast. But I mean, just some visual things that I feel that can be done to help Overwatch. And we saw a little bit of it actually during the E-League presentation. Is for instance, when an attacking team is making a push on a payload. It can be very difficult for people to understand who is currently being spectated, or who the player that's currently being looked at, and what team that player is on. So one thing that the production team in E-League wanted to do to help people, make the connection a little better, is they always kept the camera on the attacking team for the majority of the time, because they're kind of like the offense. So you're kind of like, it's like football. You're watching the quarterback. You're watching, or basketball. You're watching the team with the basketball take it down the court. So it's kind of the same thing with Overwatch. They wanted the attacking team to kind of get like the most of the view. And on top of that, when switching between characters, they never just switched from one character to another. They always make sure they panned out into third person before going back into, so you would know exactly which character is playing, or which character is being utilized. And I think that was a really important thing, just to keep everybody on top of who's being spectated. Because I mean, in the past there have been tournaments, Overwatch tournaments, where you're watching and the camera will just switch to someone else's perspective, and it doesn't matter which team or what character. So if you never play Overwatch and you see Tracer's little tiny arms, and then the next frame you see Roadhog's big arm with his hook, you're confused. You're like, what the heck, did he just mutate or something? I don't get this. So that was kind of a small thing they did at E-League that I really liked. And I mean, I guess another thing too was just kind of making it a little bit more visible when players have their ultimates, because ultimates are such an important part of the game. And ult economy overall is what's can determine how a battle goes. And I think kind of pressing on that and really highlighting the importance of alts, and letting everyone know oh, this person has their ult, and kind of there's a little indicator, and we had that during E-League and past presentations, but I believe that could be something that could be driven home a little better. And also just the timers, and the countdown timer, it's a little bit hard to view sometimes, so having that a little bigger for people to see might be helpful as well. So, but yeah, those are a few things I can think of just off the top of my head. There's probably tons. We could probably sit here for a few hours talking about that, actually, because Overwatch definitely has a ways to go. Not to say that it hasn't come far as now, but it does have a lot to develop.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think Overwatch is definitely one of the more visually stimulating, games around, where it's there's so much going on, and from a third-person perspective or from a viewer's perspective, it is kind of hard to keep track of everything there. So we did, kind of bridge on to my next question a little bit, but I kind of want to ask you. So E-League and Face its Overwatch Open is really the first example of Overwatch in particular being brought on to the big screen and stuff like that. And obviously there's that huge transition from streaming production to a television broadcast production. What do you think are some things that we could bring from streaming over into more of a television broadcast setting, and what are some things we could bring back from a television broadcast setting back into our traditional streaming?
That's a really good question, because I mean, obviously there was a stern difference to a lot of people between the streaming aspect of the Overwatch Open and then that actual final Friday. A lot of people felt like it was that Friday was a little bit watered down, which, I mean, depending on how you look at it, we definitely had to shorten it. It was only one match as opposed to the entire Overwatch. We were having 8, 9, 10 matches a day during those Twitch days, the days we were on Twitch TV. But something that I think that we could take away from television, I don't think that the television structure necessarily is something we could take away from. More so than just I feel like across all Overwatch, we need to find a way to make things just a little bit more fun. And I believe when we did our television broadcast, I mean, we there was a lot of sidebars there. You know, we talked a lot about the players and whatnot, but we had some sidebar situations. There was the whole Jimmy Fallon thing, which was kind of like just a fun little thing that really had nothing to do with the final match at all. Um, and I think during like the broadcast, the Overwatch Open Twitch cast, we were just straight into the game, straight into the competition, and there really weren't many breather or points for people to take breathers outside of like the interviews, which you can say what you want about how those panned out, but we tried to keep those as loose and fun as possible. And I think one problem a lot of esports make is they take themselves too seriously. We do have to keep in mind that at the end of the day, we're playing games, and this is supposed to be a fun thing. So I'm not saying that we need to necessarily like just dumb down the game, or I'm not saying that we need to like just goof off or make fools of ourselves. We still want to have a high quality production, but when it comes to like the production side, even with talent, with the people who are working behind the scenes with the cameras, and pretty much everyone in production needs to have that feel. And I feel like with E-League, we kind of figured that out because I mean, they use the same people from like inside the NBA, which is like, they had like these guys who would sit in this room and make memes all throughout the broadcast just so we could put those on the broadcast. And I believe that added just like this element of fun. And you don't really see that much with a lot of the esports because, like I said, they take themselves a little bit too seriously. And that's something we could definitely take because fun is definitely going to be what captures a lot of people's attention. It'll bring people in because people want to have fun. And one thing from Twitch, I wish there was an element of like interactivity with television. I really do, because man, that's like the best part of Twitch, being able to have people to share the moments with, even if the chats could be a little bit on the coarse side, a little bit on the obscene side. There always are people who are funny, who have like nuggets of gold that they'll drop. And I believe having like some type of interactive situation with television would be pretty awesome. But yeah, those are the two crossovers I can see.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think there's a lot that we can bring back into kind of our typical streaming structure, as that's typically where most esports competitions and tournaments are really held. Even though I think E-League so far has only really done Counter-Strike, Global Offensive, and Overwatch. But in the past, I mean, we've done on ESPN, there has been MLG coverage on ESPN as well. So,
right, yeah.
I mean, yeah, even branching back to those days, I think, remember Heroes of the Storm also had a brief thing as well as Evo this year. I think Street Fighter 5
on ESPN,
yeah, was actually covering that event. So kind of touching upon a subject you talked about where you want to have some more fun, and so bringing that back into more of like an esports journalism point of view. A lot of people in the industry, especially the journalism industry, kind of have the notion that there needs to, in order to have your game kind of be respected, you need to have a way your writing or your journalism in itself needs to be respected as well. Where do you think that balance of professionalism really comes? Obviously, as an esport and the culture around it, we're a lot of fun guys. All the writers definitely super fun people. We love not taking things too seriously, but at the same time, the medium kind of demands a certain amount of professionalism. Where do you think that balance is?
Oh yeah, there's definitely a balance, and I do think in journalism there needs to be those times where you do focus on the actual issues and the actual I mean, because right now esports, like we said in the past, it's just now hitting that stride, and in order for it to really excel the way it needs to, we have to be open, honest, and transparent about it. So it's one of those situations, and I look at esports like brotherhood, sisterhood, like a relationship with like siblings, where it's like we're all in this household together and we need to grow together. And I feel like any relationship you have with your brothers and sisters, the more honest it is, the more you guys talk, the better it is. And I feel the same way about esports. And that's why we need journalism. We need people who are going to, talk about the issues. We have this crazy CSGO Lotto scandal going on. And I mean, whether you like it or not, that affects the community of Overwatch, which then branches, or not Overwatch, but Counter-Strike, which then branches over into Counter-Strike, competitive. So that's like an overarching issue. And the fact that we had people who stepped up, who made videos, wrote articles about this, kind of looked at that subject and said, hey, this is not good. What can we do to get these type of issues taken care of? I think that helps, and I think that that's kind of where journalism is golden when it comes to esports. I don't have any doubt in my mind that we right now the balance is good and the balance will continue to be good as long as we continue to face issues like that. Uh, head first. We can't really be passive about things like that. Players being undercompensated or treated unfairly, like we had that situation with Team Secret that kind of has been blown up as of late. I don't know if you heard about that, but there was a Dota team that pretty much has been stiffed from tournament earnings that they were able to win a couple of years ago. And when these things get swept under the rug and there's nobody writing or talking about these things, that's an issue. And that's something that I feel is unprofessional. That's unprofessional behavior that no one's calling out. And by us letting that stand, we're all being unprofessional. And I feel like, it's like I said, a brotherhood, sisterhood. You hold your brothers and sisters accountable for things that they're doing. We should be holding each other accountable for things. Because, overall, like, we have to work together. That's just how it is with esports, with competitive gaming, your communities. You have to work together. So I feel like the balance of professionalism comes with us being able to be transparent and to be honest. And we can have our fun. We can play these games and, have our memes and our jokes. But when it comes to like the issues that are going to increase our growth and issues that are going to sustain the health of this medium, we need to have people who are able to step up. And so far, I feel like we have had people who do that. And I mean, even over on Bleacher Report, like we're not shy about talking about these things. We'll take a second and not focus on, the latest Overwatch update to competitive, and we'll talk about something that's not necessarily the brightest thing, but in a way that's open, honest, and in a way that's that doesn't lack taste. It's very classy, and I feel like if we have that, we'll be fine.
No, definitely, yeah, and I definitely have been keeping up with that Dota 2 thing, and it's something that's like honestly a very hard hitting issue because a lot of this concept of esports and organizations is the big worry that players aren't going to be compensated, right? Because they don't have a players union like they do in the NBA, like the NFL, and these are just some basic things if we want to consider ourselves a sport that we're missing out of. So branching a little bit, off into journalism, and you kind of touched upon this before, where if we want to be, if we want to be that brotherhood, be that sisterhood, we have to kind of hold each other accountable. So as an interviewer to an interviewer, what are some of the questions that, like, how do you really conduct these interviews, or how do you make sure that you're balancing out some of the drama, right, with stuff that the audience may want to hear with some quote unquote more productive content? Like, how do you really plan out, I want more of this versus more of that?
Well, I mean, I think first off, when you're an interviewer, you need to realize that you're essentially serving as the messenger, so to speak. Yeah, and the message that you're trying to get out there is the player. The player needs to have a voice, and I mean, the interviewer is got to be a catalyst for that voice. You have to kind of be the person that like gives them that voice. And so when I feel like balancing stuff that comes with before you start the interview, you kind of I discuss with pretty much everyone I interview, like, hey, is there anything you need to talk about or get off your chest? Because these are the things that I want to ask you and talk about. And I mean, of course, you want them to be comfortable with talking about certain things, and let the conversation go from there. I mean, ultimately, for me, I don't necessarily ask questions that I think the audience will want to hear. And I don't want to make that sound like negative, because of course I do care about the audience and I do care about what everyone out there is thinking. At the same time, I do want to ask questions that are relevant to that player's mental health and relevant to the player, to the scene, not just the player, but the scene. So if there's a question about, like, for instance, I asked a lot of players about the meta of Overwatch. And then, I know that the developers, Blizzard, they're watching these interviews. So if they hear from the players themselves what they think needs to be changed, that's going to help everyone, because the meta is what is the lifeblood of the game, and it's the most important thing sometimes to discuss. So I mean, the questions like that I feel are always necessary when it comes to like helping to shape what the game is. I feel like the players are the best people to speak to about that. And so I always want to make sure that's something that I discuss with them. Outside of that, I feel like the players are people also, and even outside of the game, a lot of these guys had lives, and I feel like we definitely got like a lot of that with the Overwatch Open. You look at the Misfits and the story behind that team, and there was just so many things going on within that group that could have possibly been completely missed had we not had like the time and the ability to interview these guys. And I'm so glad they were willing to be so open about what was going on with Skipjack and talk about the new roster changes in open and honest fashion, because it gave us a little bit more of an idea of their mindset, a little bit more of an idea of like the characters that they are. Like we got to know them as people a little more, I feel. And the fact that they won, it kind of was it made it that much sweeter after all of that, after knowing more about their backstory and whatnot. And I think that's definitely important. We have to know like why these players are here, because they're people, and I mean, a lot of I feel like a lot of esports is in like competitive gaming in general is based around a player's mental state and how they're feeling mentally, and being able to get that conveyed in a fashion where everyone can hear, from the player themselves is awesome. So, I mean, for me, it's kind of a mixture of those two things. I mean, I know crowds like, and audiences like drama and things of that nature. And I mean, if there's time for that, if there's a fun way people can poke fun at each other or whatever, we could talk. Like, I know there was times where Cloud9, they were, talking about envy, and there was back and forth there. Stuff like that is fun, but ultimately I like to focus on things that are, one, helping out the game, and two, helping out the player.
Yeah, of course, and that definitely makes sense. I think that's where journalism really has, sometimes its toughest struggle is being able to recognize that, yes, we are a news outlet and we need to report on what's important to the game or the sport that we're covering per se, and maybe not so much, what some of the majority of Reddit or the community of Reddit really wants to hear, and they sometimes want to hear like some of the stuff that might not be fit to print or something, like where they're taking that slogan off of that stuff. So you brought up some things that were pretty interesting, or some interviews or interactions you had at the Overwatch Open, but what were some of the more memorable interviews or interactions you had at the event? Now this can be on production or live, and it's also going to be offline as well.
Man, I had so many. I think the most interesting conversations that I've probably had was with I had a lot of conversations with the casters, just because we were the casters and the analysts, because we were around each other most of the time. I mean, we were all in the same green room. I mean, we all stayed in the same hotel. There was a little lounge area that we would like get together and just to talk about the production and things that we can do better, and offer each other constructive criticism, which was, I have to say that too. Like, it's always awesome when there's a team of people who are positive, who want to work together to make something better, who take accountability, who don't mind constructive criticism. And I mean, when you have a team like that doesn't really like take things personal, that's not seeking drama, that just wants to do good, you have a recipe for something that's, going to be pretty darn delicious. And that talking to that group was awesome, because they all had a lot of feedback about what I was doing, what I could have done better. I talked to ZP quite a bit just about the background to a lot of the Overwatch players, because I mean, I've been following competitive Overwatch, but I've not been nearly as inside as someone like ZP. ZP's pretty much been like in the trenches, like pretty much since the beginning. Whereas you got someone like me, I actually play Overwatch mostly on console with a lot of my friends, and I'll jump on PC here and there with people that I know. So, and then just watch these guys, do battle at Atlantic Showdown and, the melees and whatnot. So that was cool. I feel like talking to him, talking to Rachel, talking to Golden Boy, Mr. X about, I mean, those are two guys who come from like Halo, Call of Duty backgrounds, and they're coming into Overwatch, and they have like a different perspective of esports altogether, just because they've been casting other games and applying that to Overwatch is cool. And as well as Anders and Simler, those are two guys who I talked a lot about, just the differences between Overwatch and Counter-Strike and the parallels, because there are some. And hearing their perspective about how well they think Overwatch would do. They actually think Overwatch is going to do pretty well. Hearing that from guys who've been in the Counter-Strike scene for so long, it feels pretty good and reassuring. And talking to everybody was great. Even like Huck and Rachel, both of them, they also had like tons of great feedback for me as far as like interviewing people. Huck was another person who knew a lot of players too. Huck was getting tons of offers that entire weekend to be players like team managers and coaches and whatnot. So that I was basically a sponge, around those guys, and that was pretty cool. As far as the players go, I had a pretty cool conversation with IDDQD about the origins of his name and why he chose that. I mean, of course, most players know where that comes. Most people know where that comes from. But I felt like he was able to, explain that to people who had no idea, and that was pretty cool. And I don't know. It's kind of hard for me to pick one specific interaction over another because there were so many good ones. But of course, the Seagull thing was probably the thing that was the funniest overall because, to me, it was just like a failed handshake that, it happens sometimes. And to everyone else, it was like the biggest damn deal in the world. And I guess kind of just seeing how that thing blew up was pretty interesting. And one thing that I didn't know, and Siegel mentioned it, is he streams for the most part without a camera. So this was the first time a lot of people were seeing him. So, I guess there was a little bit of an embarrassment factor that comes along with that. It's kind of like when you're talking to a girl or a guy or whatever online, and you meet them for the first time in person, so you're always going to have that like anxiety. And I think it was a mixture of that and just the fact that we're like live on Twitch and there's all these cameras and lights fixed on us. So, it was just a funny little situation to watch. It was funny to watch it take such a big head. It was a monster with a big head, and it could have been way worse and ended up actually being a good thing. So that was cool.
Yeah, no, for sure. I feel for some reason I feel like sometimes esports has a really bad history of bad handshakes. If you cut up with like the melee scene, M2K is notoriously bad for just for giving like dead fish handshakes and stuff like that. But so obviously, there's a lot of great moments that you mentioned. And I think that's so great that, our scene's kind of developing at that speed. Overwatch is still a very young game. It's only been open release for like 5 months, like less than 5 months actually. It's actually crazy that we progressed so far so quickly. So looking forward to the rest of the year and then into the new year. Obviously, we have BlizzCon and the Overwatch World Cup coming along, as well as kind of Apex and APAC finishing up their own tournament runs as well. What is your wish list for the upcoming year, and what do you want to see come out in Overwatch in the next few months, as well as all of 2017?
You mean the game or just the competitive scene in general?
Both.
Well, we got 2 more characters coming into Overwatch, so I can't wait to see that. This Sombra character that's been teased for quite a while, and I think we recently got a first look at her recently. There's a leak. I think that I can't wait to see what those characters do to the meta, because we saw Ana, she kind of came in and changed it, and it was some people had to kind of not necessarily relearn the game, but they definitely had to change things up quite a bit. And she's been in every comp. They just recently nerfed her, and the update just went live, but I believe it just went live for everyone. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what they do with these next couple of characters. And what I really hope for Overwatch competitive is I want them to take Hanamura and Temple of Anubis just like out. I want to take those 2 maps just like out. There's already enough maps to begin with. I think a lot of the pro players actually said that to me too. They said that, there's just so many maps in this game. It's kind of hard to like master that many maps. And it's totally understandable. Those guys put in a lot of time as is. I feel like Temple of Anubis and Hanamura, those are just 2, the seesaw maps just drive me nuts, man. They drive me nuts. And from a competitive standpoint, there's just so much chance in those maps. There's no way you can just you never know what to expect going into a match. There's already enough chaos. Those 2 maps are the worst. So I would like to see those 2 maps just kind of like pushed aside. And I definitely more of a variety in map choice. We don't see many Volsky industry battles uh, and competitive. It'd be cool to see more like showdowns there, and everyone's like focused on Kings Row, Nubani, Gerardo. I want to see more variety with that. Other than that, though, nothing, man. I like Overwatch because it's a game I feel like they're going to keep doing stuff to surprise me. The Halloween update I thought was super dope. They add this Halloween brawl where it's basically like a little horde modes type deal where you and your friends sit back and you shoot down hordes of incoming Zomnics, quote unquote. And I think that's pretty cool. It's cool to see Blizzard adding like little sub games into Overwatch. And we had Lucio Ball back over during the Olympics. Stuff like that is really dope to me. It's kind of a testament to how awesome Blizzard is as a game developer, and how they've always been good at keeping the longevity in their games because they keep supporting it with good content. And I'm looking forward to seeing more of that awesome content down the road.
Yeah, and I mean, that's for sure. I think that Blizzard is notoriously good for putting out extremely awesome content, and this Halloween kind of themed event is definitely no less. Obviously, everyone's opening loot boxes right now, trying to unpack that Mercy skin, which I think everyone wants. I don't think anyone doesn't want that skin. But so, as interview kind of winds down, are there any shout outs you want to give out?
I mean, shout outs to everybody, man, and everybody who wants to see esports do well. We're all in this together when it's all said and done. I know when I got my position down in Atlanta for the E-League Overwatch thing, there were a couple people who felt like they were more deserving or whatnot. And you know what? There's definitely people who've been around the scene who probably could have done the job just as well. I mean, the way I see it, though, it's one of those situations for me where I was like, hey, I'm going to take it seriously. I'm going to, do what I can to represent the Overwatch community in the best way and to represent and just to show people that we are a unified body of people. And I feel like whoever's up there doing this from the production side, or if you're a player in any sport or whatever the case may be, just remember that we're fighting an uphill battle right now, and we really don't have time to sit here and be detracting to one another and be negative to one another. We need to keep it positive and work together. And shout out to anybody who's in the same frame of mind that, hey, I'm just here to help the scene, and whatever I can do to pitch in, I'm willing to do it.
Yeah, no, definitely. And on my side, shout outs to obviously E-League and Faceit for hosting the Overwatch Open. Without that, we might not be talking right now if that event never happened. But also, it was a great event. I think it definitely was a great first step, out on television, out in broadcast, as well as, moving forward with such a young game, having such, a well-produced tournament setting, well-produced stream overall. And obviously, shout-outs to GosuGamers, who's kind of sponsoring this interview, and obviously this will be available on their site. And if you want to check out any additional Overwatch content, you can check it out at GosuGamers.net. And, how can we find you on social media?
You can find me at Malik Forte. Pretty much on anything, and that's MALIK number 4 PLAY. And yeah, that's on everything: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, everything. So yeah, and I'm on Bleacher Report every day. So if you ever check out BleacherReport.com, head to the esports section. I'm there, and yeah.
All right, awesome. You can catch me on Twitter at ScribeOW with a 1 and 7 I. And this has been a great interview. Definitely love picking your brain and everything like that. Honestly, it was pretty awesome getting to talk to you. I definitely wanted to catch you after your production and seeing exactly pick your brain about the esports scene in general. And it was a great interview so far.
I'm sure this won't be the last time.
Yeah, no, definitely for sure. Are you going to BlizzCon?
I will be. I'll be doing the virtual ticket desk at BlizzCon. I won't be working the World Cup. I wanted to work the World Cup, but I had already committed to something else beforehand. So I'll be there, and I'll be in the arenas because I'm actually going to be doing the esports stuff for the virtual tickets. So I still get to watch and sit around and hang out and be at all the tournaments. So you'll definitely see me there.
Well, that sounds good. So if anyone's going to be at BlizzCon, make sure to catch up with Malik. And of course, I will be there doing some press coverage as well. So make sure to hit me up as well. So obviously, thank you so much for that for this interview. And I hope you have a great rest of the day.
Cool, man. Same to you, man. See you around.